Okay, so the next type of wipe we're going to be making is a turned and top stitched wipe. What that just means is that you sew it together, you turn it right sides out, and you sew the top. So for this, you'll need fabric. I'm going to do 2 layers of flannel. You could also use cotton velour. You could use terry, which is like toweling. You could use whatever you have on hand. 2 layers is great because it helps keep your hands dry. It helps, I find that it lasts a little bit longer because the edges are finished. You will also need a pair of scissors, a pattern, or a ruler and a marking pen. This is a fabric pen. I love these. And it just washes out. So you can see it's all over my paper because it doesn't really come off paper, but it comes off fabric amazingly. So my pattern is 8.5 by 8.5. And the way that I did this is I just marked out a square, and then I used just, you know, what you could just round it just, you know, by eyeing it, or you can use like a water bottle to just go around the edge to get that round. You can do these square. I just like the look of the rounded edges. So I am going to do this with this fabric. This is flannel. I'm going to do it with the fabric folded over because then I get both pieces cut out at the same time. I am actually going to use, since I have a cutting mat, I am going to use a rotary cutter and just go around my pattern. This pattern is made out of cardstock, so it holds up pretty well with this, as long as, you know, I don't go too far into the paper like I just did. I have had this pattern for many years without remaking it, and it is still 8.5 by 8.5. So this cardstock really does hold up quite nicely. So there we go. Now I've got my 2 pieces of flannel. You can take this to your machine, your sewing machine. I am going to be doing this with a light thread so you can see my stitching, but you can do it with a coordinated thread or a colorful thread if you want to. But I'm going to use white for the purpose of this tutorial. So here we are at my machine. I am going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this because that makes it easy to turn and top stitch. For this, because we're going to be sewing almost all the way around and leaving a hole, a gap, I am going to actually start about 2/3 down the fabric so that I can leave that. I did not choose to pin or clip this because flannel stays together pretty well. It doesn't do a whole lot of moving. But if you're using a more slippery fabric, I suggest using pins or clips to hold your fabric together. Don't forget to backstitch. I'm lifting it up in the corners because sometimes it gets a little bunchy. If you don't have that problem, there's no need to lift it up. It's just something that I do to keep it from bunching and to keep it flat. Okay, so here we are back at the beginning. I like to clip my tails when I'm close to the end. So depending on the kind of fabric and how easily it will fit through a hole, you can make this hole fairly small actually, but I'm going to leave it a little bit bigger for the purposes of this exercise. Don't forget to backstitch. Okay, so now we've sewn almost all the way around and we left this little hole open. What we're going to do is cut some V's into these corners, and that allows this to push through without having too much bulk in the corners and making it look awkward. You can do from 2 to 5 depending on your preference, how big you make the V's. You just want to make sure you have something so that the corners aren't too bulky. And you're going to do that on each corner. Okay, now that we have all our corners cut, we're just going to take it and push it through the hole, turning it right sides out. Make sure to push out the corners. You can use your fingers. In this case, it's pretty rounded, so your fingers should do okay. But if you make tighter corners, you're going to want to use like the end of a pencil, like the eraser, or a chopstick will work, just to get the edges out to look nice. I'm just kind of pushing out the fabric to make sure it's all the way out to the to flat, all the way out to the where I sewn it. Now, so here is the opening. I am going to clip that. Especially when I make several at a time, I like to clip it because I like to start right before the clips and then go around. We are going to use a about a 1/4 inch seam allowance here, and what this will do is it will close the hole, and you have a stitch all the way around, so it helps make it stronger. It's not going to fall apart as quickly, and it looks nice. Sorry about that, guys. And that's it. Turn and top stitch wipe.